The re-eruption of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in 2023 has seemingly sparked severe anti-Semitism across the political aisle. This is nothing new for the extremes on either side. Nick Fuentes has been parroting anti-Jewish sentiment for much longer than 2 years, and the extreme left has often sided with Islamic terror groups that had "kill all the Jews" stated clearly in their pledges. The difference here is that it is seeping into the middle, and when you dissect each side's reasoning for this increase in anti-Semitism, it is understandable why the average American lets it slide. Today, the left views Israel as an oppressor, one responsible for the torture and deaths of thousands of Palestinians. The right also views Israel as an oppressor, but not of a single people, of the whole world. Both see the money the United States and other Western nations have given to the Israeli government in their war efforts and believe that Israel is being supported in this mission of oppression. The issue with both of these perspectives is that neither of them is entirely wrong. It is immoral to starve Palestinian children for the crimes of their parents or strangers, and it is questionable that so many free nations have given money to Israel's defense. However, the fact that both of these statements can be true does not inevitably mean that its citizens are deserving of criticism and hate. Even more specifically, those truths do not equate Jewish guilt or supreme power across the world. In our criticisms of Israel, both sides have, quite disturbingly, conflated Israel and Israeli with Jew and Jewishness. Before proceeding, I want to point out that there has been a decrease in the seriousness with which the Holocaust is discussed. Many individuals say we need to let it go, similarly to how progressives need to let go of slavery or the taking of land from Native Americans, and discuss how invoking the terms of Hitler and Nazi show excessive disturbance for an event that, while an atrocity, killed far fewer people than many wars and dictators throughout the last century. This is a true statement, but there is a deeper context that I feel many are neglecting. Jewish people have a reason to have such a deep-seated fear of anti-Semitism. They have faced it for literal centuries and have been enslaved, persecuted, attacked, and repeatedly thrust out of their homes. They have a generational fear of displacement and murder, and it's hard to blame them for it. The reason they invoke the Holocaust is because it is the most recent and most blatant example of the atrocities faced by Jews, and, because it was so publicized and involved so many outsiders, it has the power to evoke fear in those outside of their community. The repeated invocation of the Holocaust is not the basis of a power trip. Rather, it is the only way that Jewish Americans can effectively translate their fear of anti-Semitism to the public. Because of this, it is understandable that Jews in positions of power use this power to quiet anything that invokes their generational fear. It may be annoying, but it is logical. This is where a deep frustration with, and belief in, for lack of a better term, big Jew comes into play. Those who see Jews oppressing freedom of speech for their own gain, or rather their own comfort, begin to believe that their intentions are purely sinister. I must admit, I do not approve of censorship of any kind, and I find it concerning that we allow those in power to censor us if it is for the supposed greater good. But, while I find it disturbing, I do not believe it to be a deep conspiracy. Jews are in places of power because they have a culture of studiousness and hard work. They aren't placed there by Big Jew on a mission to rule the world. They get to those places by their values, something you would expect the far right, at the very least, to congratulate rather than demonize. And then they spread their messages as any person in power does. LGBTQ activists in positions of power advocate for their rights, women in positions of power promote women's issues, and African Americans further anti-racism efforts. The same is true of all other groups. This further goes to show that the growing anti-Semitism, at least on the right, is not due to genuine concern, but to a desire to blame someone or something for distracting from the America First cause. It is not Jews in positions of influence that are behaving unusually. Rather, everyday Americans that are hyper-fixating on them are. On the other end of the spectrum, while the far left is significantly less concerned with the propagation of Big Jew within the United States, they similarly view Jews as the oppressor. Israel is committing atrocities against Palestine, so, therefore, American Jews must be complicit in this genocide. This is deeply illogical for two main reasons. First, most Jews in the United States do not trace their lineage back to Israel, meaning they are wholly separated from the conflict, and whether they support Israel or not has nothing to do with their ethnic background. Second, for those Jewish Americans who do trace their heritage back to Israel, conflating Israeli with Israel shows a sincere lack of critical thinking. There are many, many Americans who strongly disagree with the actions being taken by the government of the United States at any given time, and yet they are still Americans. Being American does not equate condoning the actions of the American government, as being Israeli does not equate condoning the actions of the Israeli government. To conflate Israeli with Israel is to disregard the individual, and to instill inherent sin upon anyone who shares a trait in common with those you view to be the oppressor. Although, for a practiced leftist, this is a common tactic. All men are misogynists, all white people are racist, all Christians are homophobes, and the list continues on. Regardless of this way of thinking, the conclusion remains illogical and denies individuality in favor of a superficial view of the collective. All in all, I have concluded that there is only one reason why both the left and the right have determined that Jews are their enemies. It is easier to make a boogeyman out of a group that has high achievements, some level of power, and a homeland that can serve as their hive mind. Jews have thrived in the United States. They have high test scores, they go into well-paying professions, they gain influence, and they succeed. Then, when they use that influence to their own benefit, as any and every individual would, it is not because of personal interest, it is because of an interest in the collective, in this case, Israel and Big Jew. Because of the creation of Israel and its complicated history and position, it is easy to demonize all Jewish people when things go awry. When an LGBTQ activist uses their position of influence to advocate for their community, one cannot disagree with their cause by blaming a foreign power. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals do not hail from a specific homeland and, therefore, cannot be told to go back to where they came from. The same is true of women, African Americans, and other groups. This is a luxury not afforded to the Jewish community within the United States. Jew is close enough to Israeli, which is close enough to Israel, that the average American can see popular policies or ideas pushed by Jews of influence and conflate them with a larger conspiracy that they are attempting to take over the world. Here we see in real time an example of horseshoe theory, in which the extremes of both political parties have allowed themselves to surpass the logical rise of Jewish success and influence within the United States, and can blame their pet issues on one particular sect of the population. For leftists, it is that Jews are oppressing the weak by being complicit in the starvation of children and the destruction of the Palestinian people. For the far right, it is that Jews are oppressing them, that their use of their influence to push their own agenda is not due to cultural experience, but something far more sinister. Israel, Israelis, and Jews have become the bipartisan scapegoat for what each side fears the most: rampant oppression. While I can see the baseline logic behind the rise in anti-Jewish sentiment on each side, it remains unacceptable. Anti-Semitism has risen not just in word, but in deed as well. Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports has reported an increase in anti-Semitic rhetoric and actions taken against not only him, but others within the community. The growing popularity of Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, and Myron Gaines demonstrates the willingness of the center-right to ignore genuine bigotry when it is presented by someone whose other takes are otherwise easy to swallow. The readiness with which pro-Palestinian college protesters disrupt the learning and free movement of their Jewish schoolmates proves the center-left's ability to disregard the rights and safety of their fellow Americans if they believe it is for the greater good. Overall, the average American, whether he leans left or right, has become much more tolerable of anti-Semitism in the current political climate because they have listened to the cries about Big Jew that are logical if one does not delve below the surface. My call today is not one that is particularly profound or unique, but it is concise. Do not allow yourself to be pulled into casual bigotry. If an individual touted that blacks ruled the world and that they were reporting back to Liberia to further their cause, would you continue to listen to that individual, no matter how common sense their other beliefs were? Personally, I would not. If an individual cannot be trusted to think logically, critically, and in a bipartisan manner about one group, they cannot be trusted to think that way about any other, and it is only a matter of time before their prejudice, no matter how logical it may seem on the surface, unjustly spreads to others. Overall, it is always, always best not to collectivize. Individuals are individuals. I, as a white Christian woman, do not have the same viewpoints or desires as every other white Christian woman, and it is illogical to think that I would. We laugh when politicians claim something will be good for the working class or Hispanics or women as blanket statements because what is true of the collective is simply not true of the individual. Similarly, it is purely illogical to believe that every Jew and even every Israeli is tasked with some secret operative to bring others, whether that group be as small as the Palestinians, as large as the United States, or as extreme as the world as a whole, under complete subjugation. Every Jew and even every Israeli is an individual before they are collective, and, as such, every Jew and every Israeli deserves to be judged on their own values, merits, beliefs, and actions. It is my call to you today to reject collectivist thinking, to reject the idea that Jews or women or gays or whoever else thinks for the collective, to reject partisanship in the belief that politicians or pundits with the right politics must be right about everything, and to reject the idea that you have to fall into lockstep with your demographics. You are not just a man or woman. You are not just gay or straight. You are not just a believer or an atheist. You are you, and you have the right and the ability to think for yourself. Reject casual bigotry. Think critically about what you are listening to. Decide if your news sources and commentary channels are promoting the values of the person you want to be, and reject all else. If you are a Christian, as I am, I implore you to turn to Jesus Christ. He is the only answer, and he will grant you more truth than any political party, policy, politician, or pundit. Seek for truth, not agreements or adherence to a group. Do not tolerate hatred in favor of acceptance. As always, God bless America, and truth over vindication.